Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to sit down with me and learn a little more about preventive maintenance for fire pump controllers. Your attendance actually shows that you care about what we do. And let's be honest, we design and build quality, safe, reliable fire protection systems to do the one thing that's most important to us all, which is protect lives, save lives, protect property. Never let anyone discount what we do. We really are in the business of saving lives. So again, thank you for being here with me, and let's dive right in. All right, today I prepared a brief presentation that covers the topics on the screen. Now I'll give you an introduction so you know who you're talking to. We'll dive a little into the code, why you need preventive maintenance, and I'll introduce you to a solution that could help you with solving a preventive maintenance program for your fire pump controller. Um, I won't delay anything. We'll just go ahead and dive right in. My name is William King. I'm the director of FireProCare, which is the solution that we'll talk about later to help with preventive maintenance. I've been in this industry for about 30 years. As of October 30th, this year it'll be 30 years. I've also been part of just the controller part of this industry. So most of my conversation comes from that angle, from the controller's standpoint of how we look at things and how we interpret the code. That doesn't mean that other interpretations aren't valid. It's just what I see and what I deal with is from that aspect. And the great thing about the code and what we do and what we follow, it's all tied together in one book. And we'll get into that a little later. So let's get started and keep it moving. The National Fire Protection Association is a global organization that actually writes hundreds of standards. The three you see on the screen now, NFPA 70, which is the National Electrical Code, NFPA 20, which you see the picture of that publication on the screen, and NFPA 25. These are probably the three most important to the fire pump industry because they detail and guide us on how we design our products. Now, the other thing to remember is whenever you hear someone talk about a listed product, what they're talking about in fire protection is, at least in the US, is there a third party organization that has come in and basically approved or listed your equipment as meeting a standard? The standard for fire pump controllers is NFPA 20, and that is what we use. We call it our Bible to get things done. It is the most important standard for fire protection, in my opinion. It is a minimum standard. So if you have a local jurisdiction that has something in place that actually goes above and beyond NFPA 20, there's nothing wrong with that. The key is to make sure you understand NFPA 20 is the baseline for the design of the fire pump controller. And I think it's important because it defines the performance of the fire pump, the driver, which will be your engine or electric motor, as well as your controller. And that's all included in this small publication, NFPA 20. So NFPA 25 was, again, one of those standards on that first page I showed you. It talks about the standard for the inspection, testing, and maintenance of the fire protection system. And to be more specific, what we do when it comes to the fire pump equipment is covered in Chapter 8 of NFPA 25. We're going to dive a little deeper into that, but I want you to remember it's also, NFPA 25 is also the minimum standard. So if you have something local, or you have something that's been approved by your authority having jurisdiction that meet or exceeds NFPA 25, you're certainly welcome to use that, but you need to get that approved by the AHJ. But this kind of cover this particular section is going to be the most important part of my presentation because it is all about code. What I'm talking about today is the requirements, the minimum requirements on what you need to do to design your fire pump controller and to design and build your preventive maintenance system. What I found interesting, in my 30 years that I've been doing this, I didn't realize that customers needed to comply with NFPA 25. There are some locales that push it, and there are some savvy people that drive it. However, they never consult with the fire pump controller manufacturers, which you'll find later is very important. So let's continue. Chapter 8.111 talks about the intervals on how often you should inspect, test, and maintain your fire protection system. And I want you to notice the key words on this slide. Shall be in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations and table 8112. I'll show you table 8112 in just a second, but it is so critical that you talk to the manufacturer, and that is the biggest gap I've seen in our industry. Is no one since I've been involved in fire pump controllers has ever come to the manufacturers to say, what is your recommendation or your when it comes to inspecting, testing, and maintaining your system, your controller. We know how to maintain the system. We know annual tests happen all the time. That's probably the major thing that everyone takes care of, is making sure that each year they test their fire pump system and flow water and make sure that the pump is hitting the curve. It meets the design criteria. But to the controller, which is one of the most important pieces of the system, there's nothing there. Always certain clients are following the guidelines and manufacturer's recommendations. Keep in mind, this is a loaded question. After what I just stated, there's no way they could be following the guidelines and the manufacturer's recommendations for the controller, because the controller manufacturers have never stated this is what you should do. And again, my goal here is to hopefully educate the market, begin educating the market, so that you people on this call, in this meeting, will take and help spread the word that you need to consult with your controller manufacturer on the recommendations to maintain, test, and inspect their systems properly. Now, this table 8112, again, is supposed to be used in conjunction with the manufacturer's recommendations. You'll notice batteries have to be inspected, tested, and maintained annually. The water filters annually. I highlighted the controller, and what you see there is it states it's per the manufacturer, doesn't give you an interval, and then it gives you a reference to another chapter in NFPA 25, which is 8.5. Hold that thought, because we're going to take a look at that in a second and see exactly what 8.5 says. But just remember, it's per the manufacturer in accordance with 8.5 as well. So we'll dive into that. The other thing I want you to remember is our industry tends to be reactive rather than proactive. And what I mean by that is, we don't go and from the controller standpoint or from any component in the system and change parts on a regular interval to make sure the system is always in tip-top condition. We just never have. We wait until there's a problem, and then we jump on board, expedite, spend thousands of dollars to get someone on site to go and repair and put the system back in place. It could be $5,000 a day for fire watch, and if you don't know what that means, they literally place a fire truck outside that facility, and just in case there is a fire, until the system is back up. Very expensive, and we should definitely be looking into some type of preventive maintenance situation to help with that, so that the system is ready and in a consistent has a consistent readiness status on that controller, without worries that something isn't going to work. Industry tends to be reactive versus proactive, and the controller manufacturers have been silent on recommendations for preventive maintenance. We want to change that. So if we take a look at chapter 8.5, notice the words again, manufacturer's recommendations. It flat out tells you here in black and white that a preventive maintenance program shall be established for everything in the pump assembly, and it should be done per the manufacturer's recommendations. Now, it does give you an open loop there where it says you can use an approved alternative maintenance plan, but that's done, in my opinion, it probably was a good thing that's done, because if the controller manufacturers have never published anything, the local guy can come up with something that they think works, and as long as the AHJ approves it, if there's nothing existing, then that's what you can use. Not a great way to do it. It's certainly the way the committee that wrote NFPA 25 gave them an open lane to get around it, but the manufacturers today, at least two of the major manufacturers today, do have recommendations now that can be done. And again, that was a loaded question earlier on, are they being utilized properly? And what I found is they are not, because most people didn't know that there is a preventive maintenance plan in place for some of the major controller manufacturers. There are established plans for, like, Clark. Clark engines have been around for quite some time, and they have a very detailed and a very good program when it comes to maintaining their engine. But if you think about it, it makes sense. you use the analogy of the engine in your car. You have to change the oil, keep the fluids changed, keep everything topped off and new, because you want to make sure when you go to turn your key to start the car, it works. If you don't do that, at some point you're going to have a major breakdown, and the last thing you want to do is to be stuck on the side of the road. Same philosophy goes with the engines, and it should go as well with the pump and the controller, which are the major parts of the fire protection system. Um, hasn't been done on controllers thus far. There may be some plans that local guys have put in place, but we want to make sure we can change that and have everyone utilizing the manufacturer's recommendations to ensure the best system possible in those situations. So, Chapter 8.5, NFPA 25. Remember that it requires a preventive maintenance program be in place, and you should be using the manufacturer's recommendations. If nothing else, remember that. Chapter 8.5, NFPA 25. The PM program is required. Chapter 8.6 talks about the components in the system. If you ever have to change something in that system, it kind of tells you what you need to do from an interval standpoint and from a testing standpoint if you modify something. Information is also supposed to be used in conjunction with the manufacturer's recommendation. So again, that word keeps popping up in my presentation because manufacturers, when it comes to the controllers, have never had any recommendations, at least not well documented or anything that's published. Today that exists, and we need to make sure the market is aware of it. The industry is aware that you need to follow those recommendations. So here's an example of a page from chapter 8.6. I highlight the pressure transducers because that's a common item that tends to fail. It's an electronic device. It's always seeing pressure. It's always powered, and it's very sensitive with changes in temperature. And in a cold environment where you have freezes, pressure transducer could very well freeze over if you don't have the pump room maintained above the proper temperature to prevent that. And then the sensing line tends to be run, under concrete sometimes, on concrete. It may freeze even sooner. So if you change that transducer, the key point here is that you have to perform 6 automatic starts. Is that happening? Those are the types of questions I always have when I started working on this part of the business, when I moved from working on the controller side directly. I learned that is not happening, and that is a concern. If you go to change something in that control panel, whether it fails or whether it's preventive maintenance, there are guidelines on what you should do, and you should be working with the manufacturer as well for their recommendations on how to do it. I seriously doubt that a lot of people are starting and stopping that panel 6 times when they change the transducer. So very concerning, but my goal here is to educate you and get you more information. So key takeaways so far when it comes to the code are that NFPA 25 is the minimum standard. Keyword is minimum for testing and inspecting and maintenance of the fire pump system. Customers are typically reactive versus proactive. It's just the way it goes. No one wants to go spend extra money, but when you react and something goes wrong, you're going to pay 10 times more than what you normally have to pay if it was properly maintained. Whereas if it was properly maintained, you may not have to pay as much. You also should note that a preventive maintenance program is required per Chapter 8.5. Remember, Chapter 8.5 and NFPA 25, a PM program is required. And input from the controller manufacturers is needed because it's never been put out there. Those are key takeaways I want you to ride with when you leave here. They are very important. And from here, I want to dive into why preventive maintenance is important. Now, there are growing concerns that fire pump systems aren't being properly maintained or tested. You all are familiar with FM Factory Mutual. They've actually published a new standard called FM 1330, which deals with the remote monitoring and remote testing of the fire pump system for the reasons stated right here. They don't believe they're being properly maintained or tested. There are things that are going to be required going forward to meet the standard that are different for us, but it makes sense. The customer now has no reason to not test the system if it can be done remotely, because today it requires someone to be on site, and time and manpower is always an issue. Can you get by there to take care of it? and make sure it's been maintained properly. It depends. The annual tests, like I said earlier, are always handled. But what if the manufacturer says it should be maintained on a weekly basis? Do you have the manpower to do that? Sometimes you don't, and when they don't, they skirt around the system and maybe not test it. Someone may sign off on it. That's part of the problem. How do we know it really did happen? We don't. And that has been the biggest issue, and why you see things with like FM 1330 coming to fruition and being pushed. And preventive maintenance is that proactive approach for upkeep of the fire pump system. It is the key, and for us going forward, and it's why I'm talking today about it. We kind of went over the code and told us why you need to do it, because you want to comply with NFPA 25, which is a standard that's recognized and accepted around the world. But also, proper maintenance is critical to keeping that system ready at all times. Very important for what we do. Now, the code has evolved over time. And what I mean by that is, you started with something in the beginning that probably wasn't a standard. Everyone it was like the wild, wild west. They did what they wanted to. Creating a standard increased safety, gave us greater reliability, and gave us more consistency across installations. You had a team of people who were passionate about the business, who would write these standards and put in the things that they thought made sense from all manufacturers. This included pump manufacturers, engine, motor, and controller manufacturers. This resulted in every time there was an iteration, you had greater safety, greater reliability, and again, more consistency. Controls evolved just like that. Technology has helped us move into things where we have smart control panels now. They are indeed safer, and we do get more data and more tracking, which is critical for us when it comes to preventive maintenance. The more you know, the more you can do, and the more you can prevent something bad from happening later. And if we think about it, most controllers today are designed with these electronic devices, PC boards, printed circuit boards, software, user interfaces. All of these items are great. They allow us to make the control panel smaller. They became smarter. They became safer. I remember back when I was in field service and I would travel around the world, one of the things we used to have to do was to take voltage and current measurements while the system was running. Well, before you had these smart control panels with the interfaces, we literally had to open the door while the pump was running. So there's live voltage and there's current going through there. Very dangerous situation. We had to stick our hands inside a live panel to take these readings. And that was definitely a safety issue. So the code evolved, and I want to say around 1999 or so, it required controller manufacturers to provide a means to get the voltage and amp readings without opening the doors. So that ushered us into this new era of control panels where you had these devices like interfaces, PC boards, and more electronics in the controls. That was the beginning. I remember a lot of people, we had to drag them over tooth and nail because they literally did not want to move away from relay logic, which was great. Relay logic was pretty robust. It was stable. It was easy to troubleshoot. You just kind of follow the ladder logic, and wherever you lost voltage, that's kind of where you backtrack to figure out what failed. Replace that component, move on, everyone's happy. And pilot lights, you don't have like these LEDs, which last forever, by the way, the newer panels, but it was definitely a good era and very simple to do, but not as safe as what we have today. Today, you step up to the control panel, and that because of the data that's been collected and the information that's available at your fingertips, without opening the door, you can perform almost everything without the need to open that door. And it's actually a safer situation as long as clients are properly using the system like they should. So let's talk about a solution. FireProCare, which as I stated from the beginning, I'm the director for this particular platform. It is a solution, a multi-platform solution that comes in an app form where your technicians can be in the field and your manager in the office. They can actually connect to the controller, and all that data and that information now rests inside this platform. It allows you to make better decisions on what to do. It also helps with troubleshooting from the major manufacturers we work with, and to get information and to help with the troubleshooting part of it. it's the next iteration of wow factor in our industry. And we think that it's going to be very beneficial for it, because the most important thing is that now you have a tool to help you comply with the standard, which happens to be NFPA 25, which requires a preventive maintenance program. FireProCare is that solution. Please feel free to contact me direct for more information on it. I can talk to you and your teams on it, and get you more information. I can be reached at william.king@fireprocare.com. And thank you for your time. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you all soon.